I'm Vinnie Politan. Thank you so much for joining us here on Closing Arguments. And last hour, we were talking about Kim Potter. Kim Potter is someone who made a mistake, ended up being charged with a crime for the shooting death of Daunte Wright. She thought she had her taser in her hand. It was her service weapon. She killed Daunte Wright, and she is now paying the price, and this Friday will be sentenced. And she's going to serve time behind bars on the criminal case, up to 15 years. Prosecutors asking for perhaps somewhere around 7 years is what we believe. That's all happening Friday. Now, our system of justice day to day deals with people who do things not on purpose, but accidents that happen that they are responsible for. Sometimes it's in the criminal system. Most of the time it's in our civil system of justice. It's a car accident, a slip and fall. You accidentally drop something on the ground and someone got hurt as a result, right? You do something or you manufacture something that you don't intend to cause harm, but it does, and you are then held responsible. Well, today was a day where Halyna Hutchins' family took a step towards trying to hold someone responsible for her death. She's the young woman, the photographer who was shot and killed by Alec Baldwin. He did it. We know he did it. I think we all believe it was an accident. There's no way I would believe for a minute that Alec Baldwin on the movie set in front of people wanted to shoot and kill Halyna Hutchins. It was an accident. The criminal investigation is continuing, but now there is a civil complaint against Alec Baldwin and others. Let me put it up on the screen. It alleges that on October, and I think this is all true, these allegations, on October 21st, 2021, defendant Alec Baldwin recklessly shot and killed Halyna Hutchins on the set of the movie Rust. I guess the key word there is recklessly. Was he reckless? Well, that'll be the issue, right? Defendant Baldwin and the other defendants in this case failed to perform industry standard safety checks and follow basic gun safety rules while using real guns to produce the movie Rust with fatal consequences. Yeah, they were using real guns, fatal consequences, and if they were performing standard safety checks, I don't think someone would have been shot and killed. So on its face, that seems to be relatively true, at least to me. Today, the attorney for the family held a press conference and announced this lawsuit. Let's take a listen.
There are regulations and guidelines in place today that should prevent something like this from happening, but they need to be enforced. And had they been followed, this never would have happened. This is so rare that somebody would be shot on a scene when they're lensing it. There's nothing, there's no supposed to be live ammunition. It never should have happened. Never.
Now, there was an interesting moment at today's press conference, and I want to show you a recreation video that was put together by the legal team. Let's take a look at this, because this is going to show you what they believe happened when Alec Baldwin shot and killed Halyna Hutchins on the movie set of Rust.
Industry standards required Mr. Baldwin to be trained and qualified in safe handling and proper firing procedures before accepting the revolver. Mr. Baldwin refused weapons training on how to perform a cross draw, the type of gun draw he was about to perform in the church. The first rule for safety with firearms on a production set required Mr. Baldwin to treat all firearms as if they were loaded and refrain from pointing a firearm at anyone. The industry standard required Mr. Baldwin to remember that any person or object at which he points a firearm could be destroyed. Mr. Baldwin aimed the revolver at his cast and crew within a dangerous distance. The cast and crew were only 4 feet away from Mr. Baldwin's weapon. Industry standards required Mr. Baldwin to ensure any crew in the line of fire had protective glass or other personal protective equipment. Industry standards required remote operation of the camera if Mr. Baldwin ever aimed the gun at the camera.
That's powerful. That's powerful. My guess is if this goes to trial, they'll attempt to use that as evidence through an expert, but that's their version of what happened here. Let me bring in my guest tonight. Joining me in Salt Lake City, Utah, retired police commander, host of the Profiling Evil podcast, Mike King. In Los Angeles, California, retired FBI special agent Bobby Chacon, who's also an attorney and also a screenwriter in Hollywood. And also joining us in Los Angeles, California, Associated Press journalist Andrew Dalton, who's been covering the story as well. Andrew, I want to begin with you. That was such that video it's eerie on one sense. I would expect it coming out of Hollywood, though, on the other hand, and really points the finger at Alec Baldwin.
Yeah, it's not quite, Hollywood level quality, but it's all the more chilling, for the way it looks. And it really does. I mean, this is the first time that we've really gotten a look at anything like that. There's been no video made available from the set. So this is the first time that we've really seen any kind of reenactment like that and had a real sense that something so dire happened. Now, there was no sound at all about what was happening in the room. And what Alec Baldwin has contended is that he was told by Halyna Hutchins herself to point the gun toward her. That was his contention in the interview he gave with George Stephanopoulos on ABC News. So, he is saying that he knows that this is against the rules to point a gun at someone, but that, the cinematographer who's setting up the shot tells him to point the gun in that direction. He is pointing the gun and he says it goes off without his pulling the trigger. That's been his contention. And that, the person to blame is whoever allowed that live round in the gun to get into his hands.
This is fascinating, Bobby Chacon. I'll begin with you, in that the man with the weapon, so many people's reaction to this story is Alec Baldwin has no responsibility. But he's the one with the gun in his hand. And everyone is pointing, and a lot of people might be fans of his, or maybe they feel sorry for him. I don't know. But it's shocking to me how many people don't believe that Alec Baldwin is the real responsible person in this scenario.
Yeah, well, Vinny, I think you're right. I think that some people allow their adoration of a celebrity to cloud their judgment or their thinking in a case like this. Clearly, the person who has the weapon in their hand and who pulls the trigger of causing that weapon to go off, whether he admits to having pulled that trigger or not, that'll be a fact that has to be established at trial. That the person with that gun who has it in their hand is the ultimate responsible party. Now, did other people may contribute to this? Yes, and we've heard the armorer blamed, and we've heard, maybe the first assistant director, and now the armorer, I think, has responded to a lawsuit that she's named in, bringing in the ammunition supplier as possible fault. And in the law, what we have that's different from the criminal case, people should understand that in the civil side, we have something called, in New Mexico, you have something called comparative negligence. Luckily, it's not a contributory negligence state. New Mexico is a comparative negligence state. So that means that a defendant in a case like this can start to name other people that they think should share some of the negligence. And that's what we've heard in this. That's not present on the criminal side, but it will be present on the civil side. Now, obviously, it's going to be problematic if Alec Baldwin comes in and tries to blame the victim or put some negligence on the victim. That's always problematic. But I do assume that they will try to bring in other people to share some of this negligence.
Now, Mike King, as Andrew stated, in his interview, he says, Alec Baldwin says he didn't pull the trigger. watching that video, I'm seeing this cross draw. What's the significance from your perspective of the cross draw and the finger on the trigger and how that weapon can go off so quickly out of a cross draw?
Yeah, there's a number of things that are really troubling in this thing. Number one, the cross draw swings that barrel across the faces in front of every individual in there to the point that it finally rests and points in the direction that it's fired. So everyone within that swinging radius of that weapon as it comes across is potentially a target if that weapon were to discharge unexpectedly or expectedly. It's troubling because in this practice session, you see, number one, that Alec Baldwin never made any attempt to clear the weapon himself. I go back to Hunter's safety training at age 12, and every weapon is loaded. You just have to drill that in, and I know it's drilled in those situations. Then Alec Baldwin's finger is inside that trigger guard. It's on the trigger, at least in the animation that we've seen. And how accurate or inaccurate, we don't know. I assume that it's been based on something that they had locally to really support that. And then I remember a video on Court TV just a few months ago where the action on that particular weapon was worked, and the mechanism of pulling that hammer back has to happen as part of that whole thing. We see in the animation that the hammer is being pulled up and pulled back. Now, it all may have been instinctive for Alec Baldwin, but it goes back to the very basic steps and the building blocks of safety, which are right from ground one. Every time that weapon changes hands, it's the responsibility of the person carrying it as to know whether that weapon's cleared or not.
Andrew Dalton, let me ask you about Alec Baldwin. A couple things. One, have we heard any response from him to today's announcement of this lawsuit? One, but also number two, his role in all of this is not only the man with the gun, but he's one of the producers of the movie, isn't he?
Yes, he is, and that's a really essential part of this lawsuit and the others that have been filed in this case. His role as a producer is almost more important. There are these accusations of, corners cut, at every possibility of just recklessness all around on the set. And, as a producer, that all points to him. And most of the lawsuits have focused on that because I think it's a little bit easier to demonstrate that with members of the crew complaining and things of that nature. His attorney, Aaron Dyer, did respond today and said that any suggestion that there was any recklessness or neglect on his part is totally inaccurate. He didn't get into specifics, but he did say that.
And Andrew, here's the take that I have on all of this, his role on the set. I've got to think that he was in charge. Whether on paper he is ultimately in charge, he's Alec Baldwin, right? He's a producer of the movie. He's obviously the biggest star in the movie, and he's Alec Baldwin. So when he gets on the set, I can't imagine that anyone can veto anything that he wants to do. I think he's the one literally saying, all right, let's do this, let's do that.
There's no doubt that he has the most power there. This is not some big production, and he's by far the most famous and the most powerful person on the set. He has denied that all of these complaints that were swirling around about recklessness, about, there were gun discharges before this that happened, not that hit anyone or put anyone in direct danger. But he has denied that these complaints ever got to him. And it's a little hard to believe, although it is possible that, as the important person, the sort of underlings kept this from him or decided not to go to him with it, knowing he would be unhappy about it. It is a possibility, but he is certainly, there's this dual responsibility of him as the person holding the gun and then also as a producer on the film.
Yeah, Bobby, I think that's the biggest problem that he has, is that he's Alec Baldwin. And I haven't been on many sets. I know you've been on a lot more sets than I have. Andrew, you've probably been on them out there in LA as well. Mike, I don't know if you've been in the pictures. I was on one set of a television show, Law and Order. And the one thing that I took away from that was they were shooting the scene, right? One of those opening scenes. I was a plainclothes detective. But the director was directing until Chris Noth showed up. And then Chris Noth, the biggest star in the show, comes on, and now he's in charge of everything. I saw it with my own eyes. And I've got to think, Bobby, that's what it's like when Alec Baldwin steps into the set and they're blocking a scene or figuring things out or deciding what they're going to do and when they're going to do it.
Yeah, Vinny, you're right. I mean, every day a call sheet comes out on the set and it lists everybody's rights and responsibilities and roles. And they're listed, the cast is listed 1 through whatever in terms of importance. Well, number 1 on the call sheet is referred to as number 1. They say, go get number 1. Where's number 1? Alec Baldwin, no doubt, was number 1 on this production. And everything stops when 1 says something. If 1 is late, nobody complains. They wait for 1 to get on. And I've seen PAs sweating outside of a trailer, afraid to knock on the door of number 1, but they've called 3 times for him, and the PA has to get him on set. So it's a very hierarchical structure. And when number 1 comes on the set, everybody stops doing what they're doing, and they look to number 1. And Alec Baldwin was number 1 on the call sheet, no doubt, on this production. And so there's a certain amount of power and therefore a certain amount of responsibility that he accepts and he must take as it being in that position.
And that's so well stated because, he's earned it, right? Through his career, he's earned that spot, but with it comes the responsibility. Andrew Dalton, thank you so much. Appreciate all your reporting. You always help us out, and we love having you on the show. Mike King, Bobby Ciccone are going to stay with us. When we come back, it's time to open up tonight's unsolved case file, and it involves a poker game. Someone gets murdered at a poker game, and it's 20 years later, and we don't know who did it? Come on. It's time to solve that case tonight.